Hello, and thank you for joining us today for Annual and Membership Giving, the second cornerstone of the House of Development. The House of Development is a concept developed by Cogio to illustrate the building blocks of a successful organization and explain why development is so crucial to fundraising, recruiting, and achieving your organization's goals. Before we get too far in, some quick housekeeping things. We will be taking questions at the end. If you're viewing through your desktop computer, or even a laptop, you can submit questions through the chat option on the GoToWebinar interface. People who have dialed in with their phones will not be able to submit questions, unfortunately, but you are more than welcome to contact us after the presentation. I'm Jen Wells, Creative Director at TAP, and I will be standing in for my coworker Joe DiGiovanni for a few slides on marketing and technology. And I'm going to be introducing our main speaker, Rob Kusel, the Managing Director of Cogio. Rob offers organizational advice and development services to nonprofits to optimize their efficiency and long-term sustainability. Rob has worked with organizations such as Essex and Drake Fundraising Council, Blue Oak School, Stanford University, and his own alma mater, Williams College. Now that you know who we are, I'm going to hand it off to Rob.
Thanks, Jen, and hello, everyone. So you'll note in slide 3, we're doing the fourth presentation, and it's the cornerstone number 2, as Jen mentioned, and we're going to focus on annual and membership giving and how that's done in the sector. The next slide, again, a visual on the left room, which is annual and membership giving. And remember that the first floor is retail. Generally, event giving and annual and membership giving are unrestricted funds that go straight to general operations. So what are our goals and context for today? We're going to discuss 3 main areas, and I'll cover the first 2, and then Jen is going to finish with the last slide. So the first 15 slides I'll be covering, and then Jen will close out for the most part, although I may say a few things at the end, I think in the last 2 slides. So why is annual and or membership giving, why is it the second cornerstone of your fundraising development work? Understanding the true value of annual and membership giving within the lifetime experience of a donor, and the vital role of data, how clean and organized data systems fuel the rest of the smart home. So what is an annual giving program? Essentially, it's retail. And at Cogio, we define a major gift as 1/1000th of the organizational annual budget. So if an organization has a $500,000 annual budget, a major gift at that organization is $500. If it has $1 million budget, a major gift is $1,000. And when we go into major gifts, I think it's the next webinar, we'll talk about in detail how to segment those folks with capacity, those individuals or couples or partners with capacity that are actually in the major gift range, and how you really want to not send them an annual appeal necessarily, but rather have face-to-face meetings. So the group we're talking to here is really 90% of your donor population. It's those people who are making smaller gifts repeatedly, year to year, hopefully, and are actually happy to be giving at that level. So tactics that are used are, it's gone from mass appeals during the old snail mail day to much more push-pull tactics, which is code speak for pushing out an email and pulling people back into the website so that they consider a transaction and learn more about your organization. Again, Jen's going to cover that. And best practices we know include targeted stewardship and appeals to an intentionally segmented prospect and donor database periodically throughout the year. So keep them informed, even though they're small retail donors, in terms of stewardship. And it's not moves management in this case, but rather it's really the entire that 90% I was talking about, who just need information so that once they get the appeal in November, they're much more informed about what you're doing, and therefore they would consider giving for the first time or giving again. The next slide. So how is it presented and implemented, right, in terms of annual and membership giving? So the most common tactics that we see are time-based subscription, and think of tithing, right? So having your credit card having your credit card registered for $10 a week to your church, for example, or doing a small contribution every month to your favorite 501c3. Again, your credit card gets pinged on the first of the month, that kind of thing. Another tactic we're seeing for retail are thons, and that is in many instances in lieu of appeals, right? So this is their actual annual giving initiative, even though it resembles an event. And if you were in the last webinar, we did touch on this. We're going to be a little more specific today. Crowdfunding certainly is becoming more and more en vogue, right? It's definitely something that's being done, and that is a particular project that needs specific funding in a certain area, and that can be done in parallel to appeals or thons. It just has to be done intelligently and very targeted. And then obviously you can do an appeal as related to a signature event. It's you've got everybody's attention there, and you can certainly promote your annual giving program or membership program. And then the most popular are year-end appeals, right? The season starts now, mid-October, right through mid-December, early December. Why? Because you'll see in a second, a lot of the giving occurs in this time. The next slide. Why is this so important? Well, number one, it's a cornerstone. Therefore, it's really your foundation, along with events. And also, it really helps alleviate operating needs because the dollars received are incremental and they go straight to operation. Should you have a budget? In year one, if you're a startup, no. You should just need to go out and raise as much as you can, and that way you'll have a benchmark. But by year two, you should have a goal. And that goal should be the aim to increase it every year at whatever rate you can, or at least maintain it, given that it will be a budgeted item. So let's go through these bullet points. One, it increases public awareness of the organization and its mission. It creates pipeline tactics to attract new and incremental donors. There's strong stewardship opportunities for current donors. You're engaging, again, new and incremental volunteers if you're running a volunteer annual appeal program. You're raising incremental funds, as I just mentioned. Opportunity to present a new or different image in an appeal. So if something is changing in your agency, the annual appeal is a great way to communicate that. It's internal community building, right, through volunteer activity and staff activity. It builds community. External community building and potential partnerships as well. Corporate partnerships through challenge grants, all sorts of things can occur in terms of external community building. It advances marketing and PR because you're messaging, you're telling stories, and therefore you're communicating the good work that your agency is doing in the greater community. And most importantly, it's the first step in moving donors up the second and third floor potentially within the House of Development. So this is an entry point, and from there, if you come to the Major Gift webinar, you will hear how we leverage that intelligence. And the last bullet point, perhaps the most important, it's an opportunity to get real data on your donors, which then allows you to analyze their potential. The next slide, number 9. So what can be challenging, right? Because again, raising money, raising capital is not easy. It's tactical, and it's very much, there can be challenges. The first, obviously, is standing out in an ever-growing crowd. There's a lot of noise out there, whereas 25, 30 years ago, the 501c3 sector was just not that robust. Now it is. It's truly robust. Therefore, the competition is very stiff. You need people to execute, both internally with staff, and as we know, people's time is very limited, very busy, as well as volunteers. And managing volunteers takes resources if it's done well. You're also dealing with potentially large data population sets to manage, which again, having good data is the essential part of this part of the House of Development. Because without good data, you can't effectively communicate. And the paradigm has shifted again from simply home lines, right, and addresses, now to mobile for texting, as well as email is big, as we know, and other social media entities Jen's going to touch on. And then compelling storytelling is topically challenging, right? And so the best storytelling is really telling the truth. And so we always recommend tell the truth because that's what they need to hear, given what you're doing. Now, the next slide is your classic pie chart, and you'll see that while particularly board members are very intent on making sure we get more corporations, well, here's the deal. Corporations represent 5% of all philanthropic giving. On the other hand, if you don't have a planned giving program going, you're missing out on a big opportunity because in I'm not sure what year this was, it was recent, but in this given year, it's grown up to, it looks like 9% of annual philanthropy is really made up of just bequests, planned gifts and bequests. So if you don't have a planned giving marketing program set up, you should do it, no matter your size or your age. Foundation giving is increasing, 16%, and then individuals, 70 plus. Now this is, you should understand that because of tithing, religious giving, that number is skewed, okay? So just keep that in mind as you understand the breadth of that number in particular, 70%. So your time is really best spent with high net worth individuals, foundations, and making sure you've got a robust planned giving marketing program, and obviously corporations. Now the next slide is fascinating. It tells a great story. So this is 1978 to 2018, hypothetical 501c3, which started as a very small startup in 77 in the first year because they were just starting, literally with no employees and volunteer driven, and they ran an annual giving program and raised $230. Okay, that's strictly with annual giving. By year 40, 2 generations later, now let's assume they're robust. They've got a development staff. They're doing major and planned gifts. It looks like they have not yet done a capital campaign because the number would be larger. Now they're raising on average $220,377. So this is real, and there are some assumptions here that are being made, but this is a very typical scenario that we've seen in the industry historically. And the point here, as you note from the title, is that in order to achieve this, the focus has to be on existing donors, stewarding existing donors, and then making sure that you're connecting to other donors through existing donors. And that's how this growth occurs. One of my favorite case studies, because as Jen mentioned, I was at Stanford University, is Phil Knight, the chairman of Nike. And so Phil was an undergrad and a graduate student in the School of Business, after which it's named now. It's named after him. And so, as you know, he started Nike in the 70s, and he really wanted the University of Oregon and Stanford University track and cross country to try his shoes out, his first prototypes. So being the smart kid that he was then, Actually, he was out of business school, so he was already a young man. He donated shoes to both programs, which they loved. And he tweaked then from there on, given their input. And well, Nike is what it is today. And 20 years later, he was in a position to give a transformational gift of $400 million over a number of years, which created the Knight Hennessy. John Hennessy is the current president of Stanford and dean of engineering, and he loves him. Phil Knight loves John for the right reasons, and as well as as I mentioned, the business school. The School of Management is named after Knight. It's an incredible building. Now, slide 13, the next slide. The reason why we put this in is because this is a case of an agency, which was the Lou Gehrig's disease. People that are trying to raise money for research and cure that. You might remember this. They really were successful in getting so many celebrities and individuals to do the ice bucket challenge, which really took off because of social media and the ability to actually broadcast and self-broadcast, as you might remember. But what grave mistake did they do? They never ramped up internally, right? Because you can't use volunteers or other people, external people, to actually manage data and ensure that you're collecting all the information of these donors so that you can do all the things we just talked about with them later on. But while the execution was phenomenal, they raised millions, the back end was inexistent. Therefore, and I'm not criticizing the agency, I'm just talking about a great tactic where there wasn't sufficient planning in terms of proper follow-up and stewardship, and then converting all the celebrities potentially into major donors. Just didn't happen, unfortunately. That's why we put that up there. And again, the moral here is the data's got to be good. You've got to be aggressive in terms of collecting it and managing it. And stewardship is more important than obtaining the transaction itself. Okay. The next slide is great. So, and we see this a lot with youth sports organizations in terms of the way that they are doing their annual giving, right? And it's great because it's fully mission-centric in terms of doing a 12 to 24-hour soccer-thon where you involve families and the players, the children, the community to essentially commit to a number of hours. You place them on teams, they compete for that number of hours, and then before the thon, they went out and raised from friends and family a certain amount of money that then gets in aggregate collected by the club at the end of the thon or during the course of the lead up to the thon, and it can the math is very strong, and you can raise a significant amount of funds, having a lot of fun, being mission centric, as well as making sure that you're tapping your community for unrestricted funds, in this case for an academy. Ironically, we're about to launch Kojio is going to launch 4 thons in the next month with 3 soccer academies around the country and 1 rowing club. And then we're going to do a basketball thon in March with clearly a basketball client in San Francisco. Okay, this is really a great slide. And it's just general statistics in terms of when giving is made. Nearly 1/3 of giving occurs in the month of December. It's a very charitable month, to no surprise. The next one to the right of that is the average online donation was $128 in 2018, which is a dramatic increase from when we first started seeing online transactions in the late 90s, early 2000s. Below that, you'll note that the average online donation annually for recurring donors is almost triple, right? And that's, again, the power of stewardship and the power of communication to current donors. They increase their gift. And the last piece, which is the left black little slide, 28%, so more than a quarter of 501c3s raise between 26 to 50% of their annual funds incremental income in this current period between now and mid-December, late December, as I mentioned. Although we do see many transactions coming in early January, which should be credited to whatever postmark there was, unless it's made online where you don't have a chance to do that. So that's it for now. Now I'm going to turn it over to Jen, who's going to take you through the next several slides.
Thank you, Rob. I didn't realize that you guys had so many thons going on in the next year. And I know we're saving questions for the end, but I actually wanted to ask you, how would you define a thon?
Right, so great question. And we've got data sheets on that if anybody's interested. A thon is literally looking at the mission of the agency, in this case a sports agency, and finding generally an indoor facility, although it can also be done virtually for triathletes, for example. When we're working with USA Triathlon, we're going to do that as well. So generally it's done in one site, one setting or two settings, indoors. And then you decide how many fields are going to be leveraged in this case, the number of players per field, which then gives you a baseline number of participants. Then you have each participant raise as much money as she can in the number of hours that she will be participating, and then you take that number, her number, plus the other participants, whatever they're raising, and there you've got your raise essentially. And the math is very powerful over 12 hours and 24 hours because the multiplier effect is really strong. But if any of you on the webinar want specific data about this, because we've done obviously some predictions for clients on what they would raise given whatever rate that they would be charging per hour, for example, to donors, the math is really strong for the right agency. So that's what a thon is. So it could be a basketball thon, an ergathon for rowers, which are very popular. I mentioned USA Triathlon is going to do a thon most likely, and that's going to be massive because we're going to do a global one virtually. Because for them, all you need is a pool, a place to run, and a place to bike. And they're virtual tools that can monitor. So it's very exciting. And if you're interested in more documentation, just let us know.
I was like, I think I'm interested. Okay, well, thank you for answering my question. All right, I am going to start talking a little bit about the marketing side of this and some of the technology and tools that you can use to support your events and your annual giving efforts. So the first thing that I want to talk about is the different marketing strategies. The marketing methodology that we use at TAP is the same as like HubSpot or the inbound methodology. The thing that you need to know is the 3 different stages. The first one is awareness, and then consideration and decision. And I'll talk more about each one of those. In the first stage, awareness, your target audience, your potential donors or volunteers, whoever you're trying to reach out to, has not yet heard of you. They may not even realize that you're interested in the type of work that you do. So your job is to promote your brand, raise awareness, and introduce those people to your mission. So one tactic that you can use is to create accounts that are specific to your fundraising campaign or your fundraising event. You can develop those accounts on platforms like Twitter. So like you'll have your organization's Twitter handle, but then you'll also have one for the event itself. Like conferences, a lot of times will have their own event handle and social media platforms for people to follow them. So that way, when people are interested in that specific topic, they don't have to dig through all the rest of your posts. They'll be able to just go and promote that specifically, and you'll be able to share things in a more targeted way. Once you've built this account, you actively promote it through as many means possible. So for social media, you can't just say, if you build it, they will come. You have to actively work on building engagement. You have to encourage your donors and prospects to click follow. There are different things you can do to share that. You can ask people who have a bigger following to help you promote. You can participate in some of the online trends like Follow Friday. There's a hashtag FF on Twitter. Um, and you can leverage, if you already have a following on your regular accounts, then that would be the place where you could say, hey, please follow us over here as well. And if people like what you're doing in one place, they're more likely to continue to follow you elsewhere. Now, I will say this as a disclaimer, if you're having trouble building your main following on your first accounts, I wouldn't necessarily recommend jumping into a second set of accounts just for your event, but it can be a really handy tool if you are doing a pretty good job with your primary social media accounts to build that second set so that you can target people differently. Another tool that not enough people use is hashtags. There are so many different ways to use hashtags, including just general keywords to engage with pop culture and common trends, just general humor. But for branding specifically, we have two suggestions. There's general branding. This is going to be the hashtag people associate with your organization's brand that gets used on most of the content that you put out, and it's a way for people to engage with your brand year round. Then there's hashtags for your event. This hashtag is going to be really important because it's going to help you track the reach of the event. How many people were posting about it? How many people saw those posts with that hashtag? It gives you a really easy way to track your analytics later to see how effective your promotion techniques were. And it also gives participants an easy way to connect with each other. Our case study for this is NU Athletics. Sorry, I was not laughing at the person doing the slides. Anyway, sorry, NU Athletics fundraising event. This is a higher education athletics program which made their own hashtag brand, a B1G Cats, which I think it's funny that we're starting with sports theme when that's where Rob ended, but it kind of fits perfectly. Anyway, so that represented its Wildcats nickname as well as being part of the Big Ten Conference. NU Athletics had a very successful single-day fundraising event back in 2015 in combination with National Student Athlete Day. They created the hashtag NU4N4, which was to represent the university's 494 varsity student athletes. They used that really efficiently, lots of social media throughout various accounts, and their overall reach for that hashtag was 449,000 people, which if you just think about, I guess that number, seeing that one specific event is pretty good. Even if they don't all participate and they don't all donate, at least you've gotten that exposure. And if it's an annual event that you're repeating, then those are people who are going to remember you next year when you do the event because they got that exposure the first time around. In addition, they had 218 donors who donated more than $50,000 for that day's campaign. So I think this is just a really good example of how effective a hashtag can be. And obviously they did a lot of other things to organize that event and to set it up and promote it, but they wouldn't necessarily know how many people saw and knew about it if they hadn't used that hashtag so effectively. For the next stage in your marketing strategy, it's consideration. The next slide. So in the consideration stage, people have been introduced to your brand. So they've seen you somewhere, whether that's on social media, they found you through SEO or your blog. And now that they've kind of gotten an idea that you exist and what you are, it's time to make a stronger impression on them and get them to continue to engage with you. You can do this by reinforcing your first touch content, that social media blogs and so on that I was talking about, with strong and relevant calls to action, landing pages, and email. You can also get to this stage by making content so shareable that your audience is spreading the word for you. They see it, they like it, they share it, and now other people have seen it as well. March of Dimes is a really good example of this. They had a great brand to start with. It's really distinctive and they have a great cause and emotional imagery, but their content then takes that to another level and engages the audience on multiple fronts. So the content, like the videos that they create, very emotional, telling these high impact stories, but they also differentiate themselves from similar organizations by taking a more assertive, kind of powerful tone. Whereas most marketing that focuses on mothers and babies is kind of like soft and like emotional and delicate almost. Theirs is very bold, and they have this upbeat music in the videos, and it's like taking power and making an impact. And so this content that they're creating, this bold visual style in these videos, is very effective at engaging new and existing donors while also reinforcing the brand. The fundraising event that March of Dimes is known for, actually, I don't even know if I can call it a fundraising event. Maybe it's more of an awareness event, but it focused on showcasing the problem rather than raising money. And this was the demonstration that they held at the National Mall. They laid out 700 blankets, one for every mother who dies in the US every year from a pregnancy-related complication. By doing this, they raised awareness of the mortality rate, but in doing so, they used a high impact visual that performed really well on social media and drove this massive public conversation while also making March of Dimes a well-known brand. So people are hearing about the cause and they're associating it with the brand. The end result is that they get continued support in donations, but also advocates. And those advocates, even though they're not necessarily paid donations, that support helps the organization continue to grow and create more impact. The third stage in your marketing strategy is consideration. This is where they've engaged with you. So they know who you are, they've engaged with you, they're interacting with you, they're aware of your mission, and it's time to convince them to take action. Usually when it's the conversion, I mean, you're telling your story like throughout all of your materials, your brand, everything. But this is the part where like you're really going to tell your story and you're going to figure out a strategic way to present that story so that they want to take the next step. So storytelling can take multiple forms to accomplish different goals, such as demonstrating the need for continued support. You can remind past donors of the impact they helped make through previous donations. You can educate recipients on the issue that's being advocated and the position the organization plans to take in an effort to form solutions. The formula that we have in this slide is inform, and then goals, impact, and then finally the ask. So you're kind of answering all the questions they might have before you ask them to donate their money. There's a lot of different ways to deliver that message, but one of the most common ones is email, and that's the example that we have in that slide. To create effective emails, you're going to want to focus on segmenting. Depending on where these potential donors are coming from, you're going to want to deliver a slightly different message. And depending how far along they are in their customer or donor journey with your organization. So if they don't know you very well, they're going to get a different email than if they're here at the bottom of the funnel and they're ready to be asked to donate. Well, I kind of went into examples already, but past donors can be encouraged to re-up their support if the impact they're giving made on the organization is showcased. If the gift was made as part of a fundraising drive, email is an effective channel to communicate the results of that drive, offer thanks to donors, and encourage additional contributions. In other cases, nonprofits should use current events and urgent developments to activate donors and generate a swift response. So those are just some of the ways that you can use email. In this example, the Humane Society showcased their, I guess, a case study very well. This email is delivered to people who have already engaged with the Humane Society, so they're more likely to be ready to donate. It focuses on a case study, shows the impact through emotions and also through the impact statistics. And then at the very end is where it asks the users to take action. The Oregon Humane Society also regularly uses major events to showcase its direct role in rescuing animals, while making an urgent plea for pet adoptions and donations to support care for those animals at their annual drive. So they use email in conjunction with that event, and they do a very good job of getting people to the event to donate, or if people don't attend the event, still donate through the email directly. In the next slide, we kind of bring together all those elements. So when we talk about the marketing funnel, this is kind of the visual that goes along with that. And you can see the breakdown of what the actual tactics are. So, okay, awareness. We need people to become aware of our brand. How are we doing that? So, social media, your brand itself, whether that's like your logo's design, how you present yourself on social media. Social media itself, SEO, blogs, and even events and webinars. I have automation and tools on here because while that's not necessarily a vehicle to reach out to people on its own, that can make those other tactics much more efficient so that you're not spending half of every day on Twitter. In consideration, the tactics that we often use, landing page with forms to capture people's information. Remember, this is after they're already aware of you. So once they're aware and they're coming to learn more, you want to start connecting with them, learning more about them, and you want to make sure you know who they are so that you can start to personalize, although I have that in the next stage. Anyway, so landing pages with forms to capture their information, email newsletters, sharing future events, and then making sure that all those systems are integrated in a CRM, which is like a client management or client relationship management system. So that you can keep track of all of those contacts, the leads, and you can make sure you're interacting with them in the way that they want based on what stage they are in this funnel, and then also what content resonated with them previously. So someone who's interacting with those like heartfelt emotional videos is going to want to hear something different or is going to respond to a different call to action than someone who wanted the white paper and like the impact stats and they went straight for the numbers. The emotions and the numbers work really well together, but different people are influenced by different things. And then tactics for the final stage, the decision-making phase. This is, you've got their information, they're thinking about how to get involved, which organization to get involved with, and they've been interacting with you, so you have a good chance to convince them. It's just the final stage in convincing them. So that is your impact stats, your case studies, testimonials, and that is making sure everything is personalized. At this stage, you should know who they are, or at the very least, your system should know who they are, so that you can make sure that you're delivering things that appeal to them, which I kind of talked about already. Some example marketing workflows. You could create an annual giving journey for a one-time volunteer that invites them back to other volunteering events. You could follow up with donation requests specific to their volunteer interests. The one thing to note is that even though it's tempting to come up with these like email workflows where, oh, they didn't want this, well, let's offer this. They didn't want this, let's offer something else. You need to make sure you're providing other incentives to stay in your email list. So maybe they didn't respond to that donation request, so send them some other things they're interested in. And then after you've sent them content that they enjoy, then maybe the next email. So 3 emails later, 4 emails later, then you're making the ask again. But you want to give them reasons to stay involved with you. And you also want to make sure that your calls to action are very clear. So it's not just like, we need help, or, you know, your involvement helps us. It's donate, volunteer, get involved. It's short and quick and do this thing, and then maybe it takes them to a page that explains more what they can do, or it takes them to that form to sign up to get more information. But you want calls to action that are very clear and obvious, and you want them throughout this entire process. Don't make it difficult for people to donate. And then my last example was to make sure that you keep their journey going, whether or not they've donated, with ongoing updates about your cause, and then use that workflow to nurture them through the campaign with different asks. So I guess that's kind of vague language, but basically, like I was saying, so they've said they're interested in this, but they didn't donate. Okay, we're going to give them similar materials, whether that's case studies or whether that's more stories, or we're going to invite them to this event. And then after they've attended the event, maybe that's when you send another donation request. So that would be the workflow for that. So that's how we tie it all together with the funnel. We go through the awareness stage, consideration stage, decision stage. So they become aware of you, they get to know you better, they decide that they do want to donate. And then at the very bottom of that funnel is funding. That's how you're going to get your donations or your volunteers, or maybe the constituents are more aware of who you are. And now we're going to get into best practices, and I'm going to turn this back to Rob.
Thanks, Jen. So it's fascinating, given what Jen said. If you look at the paradigm shift over the last 25 years, where it was snail mail, annual appeals, right, and membership drives, to now a very sophisticated set of push-pull strategies, leveraging other media, digital, etc. So the work is much more tactical, to Jen's point, whereas before it was literally just one, it was an appeal that went to everybody, and it was not segmented in terms of content. So it's much more sophisticated now because of the advent of online resources, which is really exciting. However, it just creates a lot more tactical decision making and work, and you need expertise in the area which Jen described, which not all of us are necessarily even close to being quasi-experts. So, okay, this slide, number 20, is best practices for annual and membership giving programs. 5 key bullet points. The first is you need to have a very strategic rollout. That tactically, your plan needs to be sound. At the very least, you need to determine appeal frequency. So what's your push-pull? What's your snail mail if you're doing that? What's your membership drive? Who's going to author the actual appeal? There may be multiple authors. You may have segmented, some to Jen's point about preferences. And then what are going to be your tactical stewardship follow-ups? And that's not an ad hoc thing. It needs to be absolutely structured as important as the ask and the appeal. The second key initiative is, and this is important, access to quality design and videography resources. Now, videography is expensive, but there is an alternative that is exciting that we just talked to one client about it before this webinar. And that is, if you have really vibrant pictures, much like the ones you'll see on any Cogeo case statement, very clear, really descriptive, very much storytelling, well, then you can do a storybook with the visuals by simply having 12 or 13 pictures coming one after the other, and then having a narrator, storytelling what they're seeing and what it represents to the agency and the difference they're making. And that can be as effective as any video, as long as the storyteller is good. So that we highly recommend with those agencies with limited budgets, because to Jen's point, the combination of visual and audio can be extremely powerful in terms of storytelling. So that's one really efficient way to do it. The third area, to Jen's point again, is database management, and using whether it's Razor's Edge or Salesforce or whatever, Donor Perfect or Donor Perfect Online, whatever you're using, make sure you're doing it well and that you have dedicated resources that are being very aggressive and active with the CRM system. In terms of annual, you want to definitely segment the point about major gifts out, anybody else below in 90%. And then again, back to what Jen was talking about, you need to integrate and have expertise across digital media and social media systems. The fourth area, leadership. Right? People are actually going to do the work, and that is staff as well as volunteer leadership, which we talked about. So make sure that you have the people power to execute consistently, and that internal resources are communicating, right? So major gifts and annual giving and communications, if you're a larger office, need to communicate. Not an issue with a one-person office, because she will handle it all. And then again, back to what Jen was talking about, make sure you leverage slide number 19, which is a full funnel approach at all times. Comprehensive approach. Okay. The penultimate side, annual membership giving, key takeaways. Again, to what we were just discussing. Optimize the balance of major gift work and annual membership giving based on your internal capacity to execute. You know, if you're a university, that's one thing versus a startup that I described. So the paradigm is going to be very different, but there is a solution for the entire spectrum. Viewed as the entry point into the long-term relationship development strategy, right? At Stanford, we had a saying, and it was great. It was, the work starts once the gift comes in. Okay, this was in major gifts. So we would receive a large gift, the bell would ring, literally in the office, and then the work began. We would then tactically determine what would be donor-centric and what moves we would make, and it would be fully planned out. And then start small. You remember that example from 1977, the $234 raise, but do it right, grow organically through existing donors over time, and to Jen's point, make sure that data management and leveraging data is an essential component of what you're doing. So now I'll turn it back over to Jen, who's going to handle the question and answers. And go ahead, Jen.
Okay, thanks, Rob. So that's it for the presentation. Thank you so much, Rob, for a great presentation, and thanks everyone for coming. We are doing some Q&A, so if you have questions and you didn't already submit them, go ahead and send them through to the chat, and we'll try to get to everybody. Rob, the first question is actually about slide number 11, and that was the one about starting and stewarding relationships. And our audience member wanted to know what the source was for that data.
Let me get to the slide. Hold on a second.
That was the one right before the Phil Knight case study.
Oh, right. Yes. In other words, this is taken from what we've seen over the years as a standard in the industry, right? And so it's a hypothetical model that is laced with real data. So we took a number of agencies that went through this cycle, and this was the average that we discovered. And it's, as you can tell, it's very dramatic.
Okay. Next
and also
question.
Be sure to understand that the 220, we saw an average of 1 to 2 bequests by then, if they in fact had implemented a planned giving program. So you can imagine the range was quite dramatic, but this represents really what is an average. So no specific organization, just data driven.
Okay. Interesting question. What storybook creation resources are out there?
You'll have to get in touch with us so that we can talk about this offline. So just schedule a call and we'll give you strong data on that.
Okay.
But we see a lot of clients handling it internally. And because with today's technology, it can be easily done. But we're happy to help.
Okay. Should an online campaign be for a targeted and specific purpose or for more general support for the organization?
Jen, why don't you take that one?
Okay. I feel like we always end up with these "it depends" answers, but it really does, because we're talking about annual giving and events, and you can do so much. You can get so much impact, and you can get so much fundraising from promoting that specific event. And I think there's a lot to be said for building excitement for one particular activity, but you don't want to ignore your organization's overall brand either. So I think figuring out like a 2-tier strategy, or like how those 2 marketing strategies fit together. I don't think that they can be taken in a silo. Next question. Our membership isn't currently a tiered system. Would there be a benefit to making it tiered? And if so, how have you seen that best work?
As long as you have different benefits and different tiers so that they're actual real benefits at the top tier that lower tiers might not get, much like sponsorship packages for corporations, it's not necessary. The most important thing with membership programs is that they analyze their membership, their wealth, and they create the level 2 of the House of Development, which is a major gift program, leverage those donors for foundation outreach potentially, as well as corporate outreach. So the most important thing, if you're doing membership, is to augment that with a very robust major gift program, because invariably the membership cost is going to be fairly low for some people who have real capacity. So that's our key caveat with membership. The tiering doesn't really matter. However, having an overlay of major gifts is critical, and plan giving, obviously.
Okay, next question. Our community, which includes a lot of our donors, is already very close to us. Is PR still a valuable use of our time?
Oh, absolutely. Particularly if they are really close to you. You need to communicate to them all the time. I was telling a client at a school in Phoenix that I get on average 1.5 emails from my kids' school on a daily basis, literally. Now that's a little too much, as you can imagine. However, they're very well intentioned, and they're all positive emails, and they're all quasi-informative for the most part. So you really need to be very conscious of your donors and just survey them once in a while. Use SurveyMonkey to get feedback on the way by which you're communicating to them. And don't make any assumptions. Just get a good sample of, at a minimum, 28 responses, and you'll get good feedback, and it'll help you determine the frequency of your communication. Great question.
Next question, is it a bad idea to not participate in Giving Tuesday? Are we losing out on anything if we don't?
That's a funny one. It's highly idiosyncratic. It's really from some agencies are really doing well with Giving Tuesday, such as colleges and others who have a built-in constituency who are in the know. For others, it's distracting because, as you noted, right, we like to segment major gift donors from annual appeal donors. So you're at risk of having potential major gift donors give a lot less than they optimally could. So it's a gimmick, very American. However, it's what it is, and we're not big fans of the company. We certainly don't impose it on our clients. If they ask us about it, we weigh the benefits, the pros and cons, and then we make a very tactical decision. So again, it's really about analysis. If it fits within the structure of what you're doing, if you've got the tools that Jen described to be able to really market it, it could be valuable.
Okay, that surprised me actually. That's a really interesting answer. Good to know. Thank you. All right, next question. How do I transition someone I don't know that's interacting casually with us online and establish a bigger donor relationship with them?
Yeah, that's funny because we've got a bunch of cartoons in our company, and one of them is of two philanthropists having lunch, two ladies having lunch at a fancy restaurant, and one is soliciting the others, and the other makes a comment. There really is nothing like a face-to-face discussion, isn't there? And really that's the key. The key is to have that one-on-one interaction with the key individual in your organization. Today I'm in Dayton, Ohio. This morning I was in several one-on-one meetings. Same thing will happen again tomorrow. And it was incredibly effective. So the more you can do one-on-one, face-to-face, really engage that individual with the right individuals in your agency, that's the way to proceed, always.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And I think that's something we should probably update in our funnel graphic is in-person interaction at the bottom of the funnel. Like it's not all just marketing technology. Okay, well
That's,
that
let
wraps.
me say one
Oh,
more
okay.
thing, Jen, because we have time. Where that is critical is in the major gift work, and you'll hear about it next webinar. But it is relevant for this work as well.
Okay. Um, so we are out of questions, but thank you so much, everyone, for attending and participating and sending in some fantastic questions. We will be reaching out to follow up. We have some links to our video library. If you did not catch some of the earlier webinars, you can watch those videos now. And we will also be adding the rest of the series to that library as we continue on. If you can't make any of the webinars, we'll also be sending out information about the future webinars discussing the rest of the rooms in the House of Development. So look out for those emails. And again, please get in touch with us if you have any questions or if you want to talk to me or Rob about any of the things that we discussed today. We'd be more than happy to talk to you. Like we said, in that personal, somewhat face-to-face interaction, whether that's really in person or through digital means, kind of like we are today. We hope this is helpful and enjoy the rest of your week.